Well, we can have anything, you know. How do you share when people's interests are not identical? See, what do you really share? Do you share your loneliness? Do you really share? This is the question you have to think about. How many of you really think that you share your lives with others? Come on, you really think you do? You only share a portion of your values, isn't that true?
Yeah.
A portion. But you can't share your life. Because if you went out with Joe and you said, "Oh, isn't that hat wonderful?" And Joe says, "Yes, I'm going to buy one too." And he bought the hat with a ribbon. Well, he thinks it's wonderful on you. But he don't really care about those things. So, in other words, if he looked at a pair of undies, say, made for women, that's right, and Joe said, now that's nice, and he wore them, then I say that's true. But he says they're nice on you, not on him. So you don't share anything. Now, how much do you share? You know, really, come on now, if you really feel love is sharing, do you really share? Don't you always say, "Oh, you never want to do the things I want to do"?
You share your burdens, don't you?
Hey, that'd be a good idea for a bank. Love is sharing. Anyway, it seems to me that people only can, I'll use the word share, can only share those things that they can share. The things that they're able to share. And sometimes we get mad at a person. We say, "The trouble with you is you're selfish." That means you don't do things my way. That's what it means. And you always want to do what you want to do, and you never want to see a movie that I want to see. You always want to see a musical, and I like westerns. See? Now, if she says, "All right, I'll go with you to a western if you go with me to a movie, to a musical," that isn't sharing. That's a tyranny. That's a deal. And I don't like those deals. I don't think people ought to make them. Because the wife says, "If I don't go to bed with Sam tonight, you know, he's going to be nervous and irritable all week." So I think I'll let him have a little bit. That isn't sharing. That isn't sharing. And I find that there's a lot of lies and fraudulent behavior between the male and female. Not that they do it deliberately. Their culture indoctrinated them, you know, with patterns that are unattainable. That's why we have so much trouble. We have trouble because I think that happiness is the ability, to a certain extent, to live in the style or lifestyle that you find extensional to you without the government intervening. Let's assume you wanted to swim nude in some lake way out in the country somewhere, and a police helicopter comes over and says, "Put your clothes on." I said, "Well, there's nobody here, and I'm not bothering anybody. I'm not molesting anybody. Put your clothes on nevertheless." Well, you can't even be you, if that's what you like. And if you were a vegetarian, say, organic food, you went on an ocean line, a world cruise, it's just going to be organic food. Well, they don't arrange that for you. They don't share your values. Now, if you're a Lutheran and you're on a Jewish ship, they're not about to share your holidays. So the trouble with the world is this country agrees that happiness is sharing their values. You understand? And this country believes happiness is sharing our values. And another country believes happiness is sharing some other values. But I don't want you to go along with this because I say so. I may be wrong. So give me ideas where people share. In other words, maybe I'm only thinking of it from the negative point of view, which is very possible. So let's try to think of how people might share things outside of scarcity. You're nice to people that are nice to you. Now, how can anybody be nice to you if you can have access to anything you want? Say there's a sailboat in the bay, and you don't have to get along with the doctrine, and you go out on it with friends of yours. It's just there. You get on it and cruise away. And say he's in charge there, and he just makes sure that nobody sets fire to it. But you just get on the boat and cruise away. Now, you don't have to say thank you, because he's appointed to make sure that people get the boat they want to get. Now, it's not in his authority to stop you or give you a boat. You pick the boat you want. Now, why do you take people out on a boat with you? In the beginning, because you needed people to tie up the boat, get ashore and catch the rope, you know, and make it fast. But if you had a rope that made itself fast, and you had, if you had these things, if you were brought up with a high degree of self-sufficiency, what would happen to man? What would happen to sharing? Is this a desirable thing? Should we train children to depend on one another? Should we raise children to do their own thing? Should we raise children not to imitate one another, but to be uniquely and individually creative? Or should we get them to be uniform? All the children draw a chicken. Say, today we're going to draw a bird. Give everybody some paper, and all these kids go about drawing a little birdie. And you hang it up and paint it yellow. Or do you have kids draw an asshole? Why a birdie? Why not draw whatever they want to draw? A big fat eyeball with the optic nerve hanging out. The kid may be interested in the anatomy of an organism. And she says, that's disgusting. Here, draw a little bird. In other words, what is thought control? How much freedom should people have? When does freedom become dangerous? Could a man build his own thing shaped like this? It's called the true church of phenomena, physical phenomena. There's a church. And in that church, they got ball bearings and transmissions and electrical conductions. It's a deep appreciation of mechanical principles. And in there, they don't worship mechanical principles. They just say, isn't that interesting? Trees fall over and the termites reduce them and digest them and process them and enrich the fertilizer, enrich the ground. And then there's another institute that deals with the study of parasites. And they look in your intestines and see all kinds of little crawling things. And sometimes those parasites produce secretions that enable you to live. Without them, well, they produce secretions that enable other parasites to live, which in turn produce secretions that don't do anything for you, but cause the third set of parasites to break down certain food substances that you can't break down. You see what I mean? If you clean your intestines out of all parasites, you die. Because there are some that are useful. Not directly, some are indirectly useful. Somebody said to me, well, what good is a hurricane? Well, a hurricane, like I pointed out in Sessions, sometimes blows coconuts into the water way out and drifts them way out thousands of miles to other islands where they've been planted. Sometimes a bird. Birds migrate, and they'll fly and they'll take a shit over some lonely desert island and drop some seeds. Little plants will grow. Because birds don't digest everything they eat. A lot of seeds that are ready to go. And sometimes birds will fly over a lake, and their droppings will produce other kinds of offspring of fish on mountain lakes. So I'm trying to say here that it's pretty hard to know whether or not man needs other men. And it seems that some animals chase their young away when they're able to fare for themselves, when they're able to hunt and take care of things. And some animals, like a bear in particular, or a lion, will do the same thing. If the cub comes over to the male, and leans against it and wants to play with it, sometimes it'll push it away gently. But if it's busy doing something else, or it's preoccupied, the claws will be extended and go whack and knock it over 40 feet, tear it to pieces. One shot. Now, sometimes they don't care. And a dog will suddenly turn around and bite at you, like that, if it bothers it too much. Now, we don't know what the instinct for survival is and all that sort of thing. These things may not be true. It may be that it is better to bring up human beings to be dependent upon one another at this phase of our lives. It'd be better if I went boating with you and I fell off the boat and you said, that's one Fresco less than when you went on sailing. But it'd be better if you said, well, gee, between down here, we went in, you took me, because I do the same for you, because we live in that kind of society. So I think that in this kind of society, it's absolutely necessary. But if I fell overboard, Ned pulled me right up back onto the boat, I'm sure he couldn't help. And if his back itched, it was scratched automatically. So I think that we work together because working alone is difficult. Two men, or one man trying to build a log cabin alone takes a hell of a long time. And two men can really grab the logs and do a hell of a lot of work. Three people that are cooperative can get so much more done. And they have a sense of well-being. Because after you finish this log cabin, John says, now you help me with mine. That's the general agreement. So they help out, and they all have a little log cabin. So, and sometimes if 5 people live in a little commune, and let's say that Indians or natives out there raid the area, and I walk over and say, why don't you people join our little commune? Because then we'd have greater protection while 3 of us would be awake. And while you're very good at making arrowheads, but when you're down with a cold, we don't get any arrowheads. So if we had 9 people that made arrowheads and javelins, we'd have greater protection. So these people get together and they build a little community. And they got a fence around it, and they got 10 little houses here. And so they feel pretty good. But they have men standing out here, looking out on towers to make sure that there's no Indians around. But sometimes the Indians launch a fire arrow at the wooden fence. I'm sure you know that. And it starts burning. And if you come up with a fence that doesn't burn, if you're able to in the early days, and the fence was staggered, so it's difficult to climb over, and very slick, if some Indian tried to climb over, he slipped down, then you can send the guards on vacation. And if you can build a large enough area with absolute electronic protection, you don't need guards down there. The only reason you need guards is you have no other way of protecting your home. Now suppose a guy broke the jealousy window of your home. Assume you got a jealousy window. He cut the screen, put his hand in on the doorknob, and handcuffs went click. And there he remained. Well, he's got there.
That I'd like to have. That's
See,
they're going.
now wait,
They're
the minute you stick
going
your hand in the
away.
window, it goes click, turns him in, and when it turns him in, say the car comes in and take him away, you got no problem. Now, you don't need police protection. What you want is protection, not necessarily police protection. You want to be protected to pursue the things you want to pursue. You want to be able to go away from your home and not wonder about anybody setting it afire, ruining anything. So what we really want is security, but not necessarily people. We always think we want people, because people meant security in the early days. It meant that I had enough covered wagons. By the way, there's a group, this reminds me, that's going by covered wagon.
One less.
Well, that was Canada. And the thing is breaking down, they put the saddles on backwards, the harnesses on backwards. These people are trying to live the old style. Now, why should people want to take on misery? Because obviously they have some kind of arrested development. Why should anybody want to sit in the old type of uncomfortable chairs? Why then? And I'd like you to come into this. What possible use is a relationship with another person? If these things were solved, I think that the future will generate highly independent people that do not depend on another person for warmth, love, acceptance, or anything else, or fulfillment. Now, I'm not talking about narcissism, where a person's in love with themselves and they give you shit about anybody else. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you can get rid of the co-pilot. I would say, okay, if you can make an electronic co-pilot, it's better than a co-pilot. But sometimes on a long flight, I can't say, it's a nice day today, with electronic co-pilot. So what we'd like is an electronic co-pilot that I can talk to. And it answers me, it never gets angry at me, and keeps stimulating conversation going. Now, how many of you believe that you can build a strong identification with a machine, a green ball, if the green ball could meet your needs in many ways? How many of you believe that? So, you know what happened in North Vietnam, South Vietnam? The soldiers weren't getting food, they weren't getting paid, and they're so used to killing and cutting people down, it doesn't mean anything for me to kill you and take your wife to bed, see, by force. And it doesn't mean anything for me to shoot you and take your rings off. See, because people don't mean anything to each other anymore, because the society is broken down. It has broken down entirely. Now, if in America, if this ever happens, if some rare dust fell from outer space that began to nullify all our agricultural areas, now I'll tell you what will happen in America. I don't know if you agree with this one. Let's assume most of the food supply is beginning to disappear. Then all citizens would be, as many that are compiled now on electronic computers, they would go over the list, and all of the children that are mental deficients would be destroyed. Can you understand that, or are you not sure? If there's only enough food, say, for 7 million, you have 300 million people. Do you understand? Now, to make that decision, well, I can't make this. Somebody's going to make that decision, whether you can make it or you can't. They will destroy those children. Then they will say terminal cancer, people that are on the way out, to the best of their knowledge. Now, the people that will be given the gasoline and the cars will be doctors, power plant engineers, soil conservationists. They'll be given the best cars and the most powerful cars, and the use of helicopters. Do you understand that? So, and then gradually, you will have great reduction in population. Then if they're able to grow food again, to research, they will then permit families to have 9 kids each, if they're able to do that. So the law, all law, is a result of the circumstances that society finds itself in. Let's assume we go back to a strange disease that hits civilization.
You know, somebody said to me, will there be horror movies in the future? I said, yes, a movie about the present day would be a horror movie.